Hi guys, so this week we're talking about masculinity and fatherhood with regards to feminism, and I think that masculinity is sort of as constructed as femininity, and I think that notions of masculinity can be incredibly limiting, much like notions of femininity can. People can be mocked and bullied and degraded for not being, masculine enough or manly enough. However, I think notions of masculinity seem to be widening a lot lately. There are many different ways in which you can be masculine, and there's a much wider variety of acceptable masculinities than there are of acceptable femininities. They tend to differ a lot by class lines and by racial differences as well, I think. And most noticeably, I think, is the fact that sort of being emotional and caring is becoming a part of certain types of masculinities, and there's this whole thing of being in touch with his emotions kind of thing as a commendable thing for men, and I think it's seen as cute and adorable, etc. if you see like young fathers being really caring with their children, as opposed to young mothers who are pretty much seen as the devil incarnate and living off everyone's benefits, blah blah blah. And so, as it's Father's Day on Sunday, I'm going to focus down more a bit on fatherhood and masculinity, but I should probably say that I've grown up in a single mother family. I've had a varied relationship with kind of fatherhood and that kind of thing, so I'm going to focus a bit on the whole absentee father sort of thing, and I have a theory that I like to float, which is why there tends to be more absentee fathers than absentee mothers, which I think is quite interesting. And so I think there's the whole thing that it's much easier for like a cis bloke to go walk about if someone gets pregnant and they don't want in because they can just leave physically, they can leave. And I think there's also the concept that fatherhood is sort of very, very different from motherhood, which I think is an absolute shame, and I don't really think there ought to be that much difference. But I think if we're talking about a cisgender couple, the women might be seen as more like important biologically, which this argument kind of gets worn down after a while. Also, the fact that we're socialised to see women as naturally better at taking on a really caring role, whereas men it's seen as like, oh, this really difficult, unnatural thing that they just can't do. This is bollocks. I think as well, if the men don't do the whole sort of caring fatherhood bit, then fatherhood tends to sort of boil down to money, to the breadwinner role, and the disciplinarian and fixing your kids' bikes, whereas women have a whole long list of things that they need to do. So I think a man's conception of fatherhood must be so very much narrower than a woman's conception of motherhood, which must lead to sort of feeling of a lot of uselessness, which is probably why they don't stick around as much. If you're feeling like there's no point in you being there, and what's keeping you there? I think also there seems to be this kind of idea that fatherhood sort of feminizes a man, like emasculates them in some way, because loving and caring and worrying about a child and looking after them all seem to be such feminine behaviours. So I guess it's kind of threatening in a way to someone's sort of gender identity, if they're so strictly like masculinized. I don't know, my perspectives on fatherhood are probably really weird because I've never had like a proper father. Had a shitty stepdad who kind of was shit, and then I've had this incredible father type figure who has been there all along, but I kind of like never really saw it until it was pointed out to me. So for me, fatherhood is not about biology, it's not about being a breadwinner, it's not even about having a romantic relationship with the mother, it's not about fixing my bike or scaring off potential boyfriends. It's about being emotionally available. It's about spending time with the child and loving and caring for the child, guiding and supporting their decisions and showing an active interest in their life. And I think that's what fatherhood should be about, regardless of gender issues, regardless of masculinity or femininity. I think it shouldn't even come into that. I think it gets to a point where when you have a child, I think there are more important things you should be worrying about than whether someone's going to think you're man enough.